Move now to the United Kingdom, where Britain is scrambling to make a plan for people fleeing Afghanistan in the wake of the Taliban taking over the country. The USA announced it would be pulling out of Afghanistan after 20 years there. This, of course, was followed by Nato announcing they too would remove their international troops. The departure of those forces has seen the local army collapse in the face of the Taliban advance. Well, let's speak now to our London correspondent, Olly Barratt. Hi there, Olly. We're seeing quite desperate stories even of British nationals trying to flee Afghanistan, and it's not easy actually for anyone to get out because there's so much chaos at the airports. Tell us more.
Absolutely right, Sally. British officials are saying that they do believe that the situation at the airport as of right now is better than it was a day earlier when we did see these chaotic scenes, people chasing aircraft down the runway, many Afghans flocking to the airport to try and get on any kind of flight out if they possibly could. UK officials saying the situation is calmer now, which means they will be able to get more and more flights in and out if that calm is able to be retained at the airport in Kabul. Several hundred people have been flown out of Afghanistan back to the UK already. It is reported that there might be one or two flights in the air at the moment, bringing Afghan refugees to this country too. I suppose you could say there are three broad categories of people trying to get home. One is British nationals themselves, people who hold a British passport, perhaps dual citizens too. The second category is Afghan people who've been working with the British in Afghanistan, and the UK is promising to get those people back to the UK and allow them to settle here. And then you have those refugees, people who are trying to flee Afghanistan, and that is the so-called bespoke arrangement that the UK says it's working on. We don't yet know the details of that scheme. We should have more details soon, but we don't have it quite yet. We don't know, for example, how many refugees Britain is planning to take in. It is being suggested that the scheme that they are putting together is going to be much like the scheme Britain had in place for people fleeing the conflict in Syria. And we can look at that scheme and say that since 2014, Britain has allowed 20,000 Syrians to settle here in the UK. So perhaps you might surmise that if it was to be of a similar scale, then the numbers might be similar when it comes to this crisis too.
Well, I mean, you know, we're already hearing reports that Turkey is planning to build a wall to keep out what they expect to be potentially millions of refugees coming from Afghanistan. The fact that the UK is now looking at a plan for Afghan refugees, is it a sign, do you think, Olly, that they really are preparing for a full-on humanitarian crisis, even though the Taliban is saying it doesn't want to fight, it doesn't want revenge?
Very much so. European capitals are preparing themselves for an exodus of refugees from the country, whatever the Taliban might be saying today. We've seen those feelings expressed by European leader after European leader. Boris Johnson's been having a series of phone calls to British Prime Minister. He's spoken to Emmanuel Macron. They've talked about the idea of trying to head off a humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan. He's had a conversation today with Imran Khan, the Pakistani leader. They've also talked about trying to avoid a humanitarian catastrophe too. And then you get to the idea of what European leaders want to do about dealing with the Taliban themselves. Boris Johnson effectively warning Imran Khan when he spoke to him that he doesn't believe that there should be any unilateral recognition of the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. He says that must be done on an international basis. He also says that must be done subject to the Taliban upholding human rights standards, and that is very much going to be something that we're going to have to take a little bit of time to take stock on, because, as I say, whatever the Taliban are saying today, the proof will very much be in the pudding in the coming days, weeks and months.
Yeah, and we're certainly seeing the United Nations sending out similar concern statements that they will watch and wait. Slightly better news coming from the UK is that on the jobs front, joblessness has dropped. It's now at 4.7%. Is that a sign that the economy is really recovering from the impact of COVID-19?
certainly it seems to reflect two things, Sally. One is that the furlough scheme that the government has had in place, where it's been paying a large chunk of the wages of a large chunk of Britain's working population while they weren't able to go to work, that furlough scheme is unwinding, and it seems like people are being able to go back to work and find employment as restrictions on the economy ease. Another thing we're seeing in the statistics today is a huge amount of vacancies in the British economy. Now, that is a reason in one regard for some concern that those vacancies aren't yet being filled, but also for some optimism that there are more jobs out there for people. There are 953,000 job vacancies in the UK economy at the moment in the 3 months to July. That is a record number. Another interesting stat we got today, annual growth in average pay is at 7.4%. Again, that reflects a couple of things. One is inflation, which is growing in the UK economy. That is also a concern. But it also reflects the fact that people were being paid less this time last year when so many people were on furlough and having a large chunk of their wages paid by the British state. And as I say, that is now unwinding and the economy is really beginning to pick up pace.
Thank you so much, Olly Barratt, our correspondent in London.